Hey guys, welcome back once again to Reignited. I'm sure you saw the thumbnail. In this video, we are going to be building a set of traction bars for the Hemi Swap C10 over there. Project's going really well. I think it's really coming along nicely, and traction bars are definitely something that were always in my plans for this vehicle. As you guys know, if you put a decent amount of power through a vehicle with a solid axle rear end, if you don't do something to combat the axle wrap that's going to happen, you're going to have a really bad wheel hop issue. And that was definitely not something I wanted to have, especially because I am planning on taking this thing to the drag strip a fair bit. So to combat that, we're going to go ahead and put some traction bars on there. Now in this video, I'm going to be emulating the Caltracs style traction bars. And I could have just bought a set, but to be honest, you guys know me by now. You know that if I can build something, I will try just to see if I can do it or not. And I think it's fun anyway. It's just entertaining to me. So I have all kind of the basic raw materials I'm going to need here. I did purchase a set of these rod ends here. Now, one side is a left-hand thread, the other side's a right-hand thread. That way, when the lock nuts are loosened up, you can reach under there, actually adjust the bar for the different tension on it. That way you can adjust it for if you're driving on the street or if you're driving on the track. So that's what we got, guys. That's what's gonna happen in this video. Our first step we need to do, let's go ahead and get that truck all jacked up, get it properly supported so that the rear axle is hanging free. That way we can loosen up the front spring hangers. Let's get into it, guys. All right, we got the rear axle hanging freely on there. Now I'm going to go ahead and take out that bolt for the front spring perch. I'm going to let the leaf spring drop down, and that way I can kind of inspect it. I think the bushing is pretty much done for in there. Now the Caltracs bars, they actually replaced the bushing with a solid bushing in there. And I don't actually have a lathe anymore, so I can't make my own bushing. So I'm kind of looking in to see what kind of aftermarket options there are for a solid bushing. If there's none like that, I'm just gonna replace it with a factory stock bushing in there. Should give me some decent control over it. I don't think the solid bushing is 100% necessary. I know it helps a lot, but I don't know if it's 100% necessary. So anyway, I'm gonna get this thing unbolted. I'm gonna take a look at it, and then I can kind of decide how exactly I'm gonna proceed from there. All right, so one of the things we're trying to do here is on the front of the leaf spring, I need to have a bracket that goes on either side of it that supports here. So there's gotta be room for that inside the spring hanger. But if you look at the spring hanger itself, you can kind of tell that this edge is kind of scrunched inward here. It was compressed when it was tightened down from the factory. So this could actually be moved back just a little bit to give me the proper room that I need. I think that's the direction I'm going to go. But also the bushing on the leaf spring, you can tell sticks out quite a bit. So I may end up having to cut just a little bit of that leaf spring off of there just to make sure I have enough room for the spring hanger, shackle hanger to go on there. All right, so I went ahead and got the edges of the front spring bushing all trimmed up. So now it's nice and smooth. It's ready for the brackets to go on either side. Now I have to cut those brackets out. I'm gonna have to make 2 per side, so 4 altogether, 4 identical brackets. And honestly, I don't have any actual measurements on these things. So I'm just gonna have to kind of guess and go off of what I've seen online, get something that's going to be close. So you might see as the project moves along, I might modify them a little bit, adjust them a little bit. So I'm gonna kind of give myself a little bit extra leeway when I cut these things out, make them a very basic shape so that they are easy to trim or modify as I go along. All right, so what are traction bars and why would you want them on your vehicle? Well, if you drive a vehicle that's rear-wheel drive, equipped with a solid axle rear end and has leaf spring suspension, it's very common. They've used that for decades and decades. But basically what's happening is you have your drive shaft coming back to the pinion flange here, and under normal driving situations, this can absorb all the force that's applied through that drive shaft. It'll kind of just take it no problem. However, if you're putting a large amount of force through it all at once, well, that force can cause the pinion to want to rotate up. And as you can see, because it's tied in with the leaf spring itself, if the whole differential attempts to rotate, then it turns your leaf spring into something of an S shape here. That's what's called axle wrap, and that's what we're trying to avoid what's happening. Because if you remember Newton's third law, which I might be misapplying here, But basically for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So every time that this does this, where it goes back and tries to wrap up, it's immediately going to come right back down. And then because power is still going through it, it's gonna go right back and then down and back and down. So this thing is oscillating like this very, very rapidly. That's what's known as wheel hop. So the whole entire suspension starts hopping up and down, and you're getting intermittent traction each time. As you can imagine, that can break things very, very easily. So you could break an axle shaft, or you could break your U-joint here because it's going through such extreme angle changes while still having power put through it. You could break something in the suspension itself. All of those are bad news. So we want to keep the wheels planted firmly on the ground as best as possible. That gives us our best opportunity for traction. That's why what we're installing are called traction bars, because they prevent this sort of loss of traction from happening. Let's take a look at exactly how they work. All right, let's discuss the exact same scenario here where you're putting a large amount of power into the rear end, but this time we have our traction bar setup installed. So same situation, the pinion is going to want to start to rotate upward based on that power, but now with our traction bars, as this differential housing starts to move, it's pushing this forward, which then causes this to go forward, rotates around the leaf spring eyelet, and then presses down right here. So atop the leaf spring, there is a roll pin here that will then contact the top of the leaf spring and stop. This means that at a certain point, the pinion can no longer rotate any further, and that keeps your wheels on the ground and keeps the good traction happening. So for track use, you can actually adjust this all the way down to where this roll pin is actually touching the leaf spring right from the start. That way, the differential cannot move at all. Now for street use, you want to back it off a little bit, give yourself a little bit of play there just for drivability purposes, but this essentially will give you the same benefits of having a 4-link rear suspension. Now a 4-link rear suspension is one of the most desirable out there, and the reason is because it gives you the utmost control over your rear differential housing itself. Now, this isn't quite as good as a 4-link, but it does give you the positive benefits of a 4-link without the expense covered in having to cut out your entire leaf spring suspension and replace it entirely. So for a relatively low initial investment, you can have kind of the best of both worlds here, and I think it's gonna work out great on our truck. So let's get back to building them. All right, so I got the front hanger mount done here. So this bar right here is what actually rests against the top of the leaf spring mount. You'll see that once I actually get this thing installed. But went ahead and tossed this thing together, put a couple of braces on there, front and back, just to make sure that this thing stays nice and square. So we're building up the other one right now. As you can see, what I did was I went ahead and cut these little spacers that are going to be the exact width that I need. So that way I can kind of just hold these things in place and make sure that this thing stays nice and square as I'm welding it up. You can see I'm just about ready to weld in this bar right here for the front, and then I gotta put the braces on there, and both sides will be ready for installation. All right, let's continue. All right, there we go. Now we got both sides fabricated up. These are our front spring hanger mounts. So let's go ahead and get these installed over the leaf springs, get them back installed into the front leaf spring purchase, and then we can start building the rear bracketry, which attaches to where the U-bolt plates go, and then we'll be able to run our bars from that point. All right, so I'm about ready to start welding up the other side axle plate, and you can see here that what I've done is I've gone ahead and created another spacer here so I can kind of cinch this thing down, make sure it stays perfectly square. Now, one thing that maybe you want to keep in mind is to make your spacer just slightly larger than what you're trying to fit in there, because if you make it the exact width of this, it can be very difficult to actually fit it back in. But if you make it just a little bit larger, not much, it'll slip in there easily and won't fight you quite so much. So I've got the spacer in there now. I've got this situated. It's a good idea to mark on these axle plates which side is the front and which side is the back, because there is a difference for the centering pin on this thing. So anyway, that's all set up. I'm going to get this thing welded on, and then I'm going to weld on the bracing on the back, and then we're going to go ahead and get this thing reinstalled. All right, got this other axle plate all welded up. Got the brace along the back there. Take a look there. I mean, again, these are some of the easier welds to do, so it's not hard to make them look decent, but nice and clean. I like the TIG because it doesn't have any sort of spatter. Even with the gas, it'll kind of spatter a little bit. So I like the TIG because it's just really clean and you can make it look decent pretty easily. All right, now we got those axle U-bolt plates all welded up. Let's go ahead and get them back on the truck and let's measure up for our link bars. All right, we got the front hanger on there and we have the rear mount on here. So how do we figure out what length to make our bar? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and jack up the rear axle to actual ride height. So what you want to do is just keep bringing it up slowly until it's just barely starting to come off the jack stands. Then you know you're at the proper height. Okay, right there is where we want to be. All right, so with the Caltracs style bars, this little bar here or roller that actually contacts the leaf spring when this thing is actuated, they say for street use to set this up about 1/2 inch off of the leaf spring itself. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now I've already set up my rod ends here. They're halfway through their adjustment. That way, no matter what, I have the maximum amount of adjustment to either shorten or lengthen this bar to achieve whatever results I desire. All right, so now that we have that set up, it's just a matter of measuring from one rod end to the other. There's a beveled edge on these rod ends that's designed to be welded, so you just measure directly from that beveled edge. 21 inches here. Basically dead on 21. So that's where I'm going to start, and if I need to, I can adjust from there. Let's cut some tube. So the tube that I'm using for these bars is this 1.25" OD DOM tubing, or drawn over mandrel tubing. So this stuff is really nice because it doesn't have any sort of a visible weld seam on there, just really, really clean and smooth. But also it's not just 1.25" diameter, but it's also 3/16 walls thickness. So this is some seriously thick tube and it'll more than handle anything I throw at it here with this truck. All right, now I need to go ahead and bevel the edges here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tack this right now to the rod ends and then reinstall it and make sure that my sizing is correct. All right, this is what we're looking for here, a nice clean fitment with the beveled edge on there. Like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and tack this thing up and test fit it. So, got the bar installed there, and you can see the little roller is about 1/2 inch above the leaf spring. So then, when you go to the track, you just loosen up your lock nuts here on each side, and then you spin the bar. See if I can go the right direction. Brings it down. There we go. Brings it down to where it contacts the leaf spring and your traction bars are in full effect. All right, so we've got the one driver's side link bar on there all welded up. It's ready to go. Now we're gonna move on to the passenger side. And a word of warning, don't just automatically cut the passenger side one to the exact same length as the driver's side one. Ideally, when you're fabricating stuff, things need to be as close to the same as possible, but sometimes in the real world, there are minor adjustments that have to be made. And you wanna have the maximum amount of adjustment possible with that link bar. So go ahead and actually measure out the other side and see if there's any sort of difference before you actually make your cut. Because again, we do have limited materials when you work on this kind of thing. Also another point, the threaded rod ends Obviously you want to have one left-hand thread and one right-hand thread on a single bar. That way, as you spin it, you can either lengthen it or shorten the rod. If you end up in a situation where you have two right-handed on one tube and two left-handed on another, you really haven't helped yourself out, because now you actually have to unbolt the link arm completely to lengthen it or shorten it. So again, just make sure you have one left hand, one right hand thread, you'll be in good shape. So good news, it turned out that both sides of my link bars were in fact the exact same size. So hey, I did something right there. Went ahead and cut that one out, got it all welded up. So now my bars are finished and ready to be installed on the truck. Here we go. Got our bar installed there. All the way back. Here we go. Bar to back. Actually, that's really good, because that means I'll still have my full travel of my suspension. Very cool. You can see now that the first will contact the extra leaf here, right there. That actually does better than I expected it to. I thought that would contact way sooner. So this is nice, because I have almost all of my droop from original. All right, let's get this wheel back on. So you can kind of tell they tuck back in there pretty nicely. Pretty much can't really tell unless you're actually looking for them that they're there. Not like it matters. I think it's pretty cool though. All right, one more project checked off the list. Got those traction bars installed on there. Now they're not fully installed. I'm gonna have to take them back off for paint and everything. And I wanna put some anti-seize on the rod ends as well, all the threads, make sure that they stay spinning smoothly no matter what. But I'm really excited I got that on there. It was a fun project, took me about a day and a half. I spent probably, I don't know, somewhere around 150 bucks in materials for it. Not too bad overall. I really like the result. Maybe it's not as perfect as the Caltracs style, but I'm still really happy with the way they came out. I think that it's going to work really well, and it was definitely something I wanted to do to keep the axle wrap from happening, because wheel hop is a bad thing, you guys. I don't want any part of that on this truck, and it's going to see a lot of it if I didn't have any sort of traction aiding device on there. So I'm happy I went the direction I did. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you did, throw me a comment down below what you thought, or if you had some ideas on how I could have done things a little bit better or improved things. Always nice to hear you guys' feedback. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's reignited.tx, and there'll be some more videos for you to watch, maybe here, all more automotive content. Hopefully they'll find something there that you guys are interested in, and we'll see you next time on Reignited.